Good evening, everyone. I'm pleased and honored to have this podium and platform to talk about donation challenges in kidney transplantation. As I've been introduced by my mentor, also Nyerere has been my mentor. I am the transplant coordinator at the KNH. And the KNH, for the people who are joining and maybe they are not from Kenya, that's the hospital we are talking about. And what is in front here is a new transplant unit. Yeah. So it is an extension of the old, for the people who know KNH, is an extension of the old Reno unit towards the administration block. Let me just talk, I like introducing what I'm talking about for the people maybe who are joining us for the first time, that KNH is a public and tertiary hospital and is a teaching hospital for the University of Nairobi College of Health Sciences. It is a 2,000 bed capacity hospital. Transplantation began in 1984, and we perform an average of 25 transplants per year. From 2020, it now has a dedicated transplant unit with a 16-bed capacity, and other transplants are to begin, starting with liver transplant. It should have started at the beginning of this year, but now with the COVID situation, transplant is some of the services that has been severely affected, because as you know, that the patients will need to be given very heavy immunosuppression, and any minor increase in immunosuppression and somebody gets COVID. Now the COVID is in the community, it is within the staff working there. Even if the patient you had, even if you could have screened the patient whether they have COVID or not, you never know whether they pick it up from any worker, health worker and all that. And now it could be very detrimental to the program. So transplant currently has been suspended. We're just doing preparations, and hopefully by January, when things go down, we'll be able to catch up with where we are. I like beginning my presentation with this overview so that we're on the same page, just in case we have new people who are new in Reno, that once somebody has been declared that they have end-stage renal disease, there are three routes. You can either go to hemodialysis, you can go to peritoneal dialysis, or you can go to kidney transplant. Now, kidney transplant is our interest today, and in kidney transplant, we either have living or deceased. And for this case, in the country, the plans are in high gear to start the program in the country. It is involving, it's labor intensive, and also finances are involved to start it, and law and all that. So the things are being worked on, and maybe we thought we could have started by now, because the law was signed into law by the president in 2017, but the operationalization is what is still going on. And when you talk about deceased organ transplant, we have somebody who died after cardiac death, what is known as deceased cardiac death, or death after brain death. You know, the patients who are in ICU who have been involuted to brain death, you know, their GCS, Glasgow Coma scale, is below 3. They can donate organs. Once the organs are evaluated, all the organs, heart, liver, kidney, and all that can be donated. But we limit ourselves to living, because that is what we practice. And in living donated, this is where you have a donor and a recipient wheeled to theater at the same time. Surgery takes place around the same time. And the person donating can either be related to the donor, to the recipient, or non-related. There's nothing that makes the transplant not work related to, you know, connected to genes or something like that, because nowadays medication are there. Whether a black person can give a black white person and all that, that one can work. Why we don't practice it a lot, the non-related, is because of the ethics. Like, how will I believe that the person who works in your shamba has just decided to give a kidney? Chances are that money has changed hands, and that one is normally not accepted in the transplant world. There's normally a law that works against trafficking, because that means if you can afford an organ, you buy. If you can't afford an organ, you leave. If you can afford an organ, you leave. If you can't afford an organ, you die. So that one will bring a lot of ethics related to donation. So that is why we limit ourselves to related donation. It's good to get that clear. Let me introduce kidney transplantation, that it is a preferred treatment for end-stage kidney disease, and the growing success of therapy has resulted in the ever-increasing demand for kidney donors. In the early years, transplant was performed with kidneys obtained from near relatives, as well as from living donors other than parents, siblings, and children. The results of cadaver donor grafts at that time were not encouraging, but the number of living-related donors available was not sufficient to meet the demand. So once we are evaluating, we look at about evaluating a donor, there is a chance that you can miss a donor within your family or the people that you are related to, and that is what brings about the need for deceased organ. Other than wasting the organs, can they be used by other people? So what is organ donation? An organ donation is a process of surgically removing an organ or a tissue from one person and placing it to the other person, that is the recipient. And types of donors, there are two types of organ donation, and I have talked about the living and I've talked about the deceased. The following organs also, let's also not think that we are only talking about kidney. Other organs can be donated and transplanted: the liver, the heart, the lung, the intestines, the pancreas, the brain, the bones, the joints, many other things can be donated. We normally talk about solid organs or tissues. Of the living donation, where you can have talked about either you are related to the person or not related, we also have what we call paired donation. This one is not that you have, this one is a source of donation in itself. For example, this donor 1 is supposed to donate to recipient 1, and this donor 2 is supposed to donate to recipient 2. Because of some problem somewhere, maybe they are reacting, the same way we normally do blood cross matching. The something causes reaction here. They can exchange. This donor can take this recipient, and this donor can take that recipient. It's normally called crossover or paired donation. As long as, just in case somebody changes mind, maybe we plan this transplant will happen today and the other transplant will happen tomorrow, and somebody changes mind, it is advised that they go to the four of them at the same time. That is what we call paired donation. Let's qualify the kidney donor candidates. Number 1, they must be psychologically stable. They must be freely willing to donate, free from a coercion. Like that's why we refuse to get donors in our program. Every program has its own rules, but in KNH, if you are below 25 years, you are still in college. There's no way you'll tell us that you have voluntarily volunteered yourself to donate your kidney to your parent. Chances are the parent has told you, give me your kidney and then I pay your college fees or something. So we normally, that's why we talk about age there. And we try to pick somebody who's not been coerced. If you are it's a free gift. The same way, once we have, let's say, blood donation drives, when anybody from the city of Nairobi can walk into Kenyatta Hospital and donate blood to anyone, is the spirit of donation. Then the donor must be medically and psychologically suitable. Sometimes maybe you could have somebody who's not psychologically stable, and the family takes advantage of that kind of a person, and they volunteer that the person who's going to donate. Medically stable is that for you, it's like money. You can only give money if you have money. So you must have health to share the health with somebody else. Medically suitable means that you have no other conditions that prospectively they don't look like they'll cause your kidney failure in the near future. So many things are done, like we check whether you have diabetes, liver disease, heart disease. You must be physically fit such that you can be able to survive with one kidney. The donor must also be fully informed of the risks and benefits. Like, what are the risks? Anytime you are being wheeled to theater, it is not without surgical risks. You can bleed, you can get an aesthetic risk. Let them understand that. I always give an example of saying we are used to telling patients, when you unaenda theater, sign up. So you need to really take the patient through the whole process. How long will they be in the hospital? Describe even intubation, the anesthesia. We will cut here, we will take this. That is what we call fully informed risks and benefits. The benefits, you can tell them that now it's a time also that they'll have an overall health health examination. Then they be fully informed of the effectiveness of the current dialysis treatment available to the recipient, such that sometimes they may wonder, why am I donating a kidney and there is dialysis, there is PD? Let them know the advantage of transplant versus the others. We normally have steps that we normally take the patients through when they are donating. Number 1, we have the initial assessment by the doctors and transplant. This one is both even, we are assuming that the recipient, here we are just talking about the donor, we are assuming that the recipient has been recommended by a doctor to have a transplant. So once they send the donor to the clinic, we start the initial assessment. Do they have, is the BP normal, is the sugar normal, the basic things, history. What is their sport? You know, some people maybe his main sport is a rugby player. You know, how will it affect the future donations and all that? Educate. Number two, the second step is to educate the donor. If within the clinic, the coordinator and the counselor, they take the patient through the whole donation process. Even not just donation itself. You begin from why did the kidney fail for the prospective recipient. So you can give health education here. You can give videos. Some centers have videos that run. You have pamphlet information such that is not a hidden practice, such that you want to drive them into donation while hiding some cards at the table. Number three, the next step is to have donor cross match, where you cross match this donor and the recipient, and the cross match is the same aspect, scientific aspect as blood cross matching. Then you assess the renal function. We are assuming that the patient has two kidneys, and the two kidneys have 50% function. The whole function of the kidney, at least every kidney can do 50-50, but we normally take up to 48%. We also, normally, I am low, I understand. Nijiongeze. Assessment of renal function. So we normally have some tests that are, number one, we'll do an ultrasound to ascertain that the patient has two kidneys. That is number one, okay? But you may be having two kidneys, but one kidney is the one that is working, the other one is not the one that is optimum. So the doctors must evaluate that the kidneys are working equally, such that you can be left with one working well, and we can get one that works well. Then we have general health assessment. That is the one I was talking about. We were talking about diabetes, hypertension, infections, HIV, hepatitis, all those. Then you may refer the donor, not you may, you have to refer the donor to the surgeon to ensure that they are surgically practical, surgery will happen. Social worker, where does this person live? Is it a person who was collected? Maybe is a relative who was suffering somewhere and is being exchanged for his kidney for their money. You know, how will he live after this? Will he be able to afford follow-ups in the clinic? Psychologist, of whether they are mentally stable to make this landmark decision. Renal angiogram, this is where we evaluate the veins, because the kidney will be attached to the recipient with veins, mishipa yake. So are they well? Are they enough, you know, for anastomosis? Are they blocked? How many are they? That is what we normally call bench surgery during surgery. Then step 8, we normally call for a multidisciplinary team meeting where the whole team, anesthetists, nephrologists, surgeons, counselor, coordinator, and everybody discusses the same patients with the whole information given. And once he has been, the patient has been passed to continue with surgery, now we plan for surgery. That is step 9. Let me also insist that you must assess for risk of donation. Like, for example, is this a diabetic person or somebody who looks like they've been diabetic, for example, in the next few days? And how will they survive with the one kidney? That is the risk of donation. Voluntarism. Do you think that somebody has promised them something? And understanding. Are they understanding that they will need to go to theater under general anesthesia and a large surgery, incision site will be done? Have they understood that part? There are advantages of living donation when you can, supposing we have both in this country, we are able to do both deceased and we're able to do living donation. Compared with deceased donation kidney transplant, the benefits of living donor kidney transplant includes that we have less time spent on the waiting list, which could prevent possible complications and deterioration of health. Supposing it's me and my sister, and from the word go, I know that I can be able to be a good donor. That one spends less time. But sometimes in the countries that practice deceased organ donation, you are on the waiting list like forever until you find that kidney that matches with you. And you find like the waiting list is also long because also there's an increase in cases of kidney disease. there's potential avoidance of dialysis. Like, for example, if you had come to the clinic when you are in CKD stage 5, before you get to end-stage renal disease, you may pick a donor, work up the patient very fast, and you don't have to pass through dialysis. I have always gotten the impression that some people imagine you must pass through dialysis for you to be transplanted. No, you may avoid, if you come on time, you may avoid to be dialyzed. If already you have a donor, we go straight to transplantation. There are better short and long-term survival rates because the kidney has been harvested within a short time. You know, we normally do it in our hospital, like we have 2 adjacent theaters where 1 kidney is harvested, and within a very short time, you know what we call the short ischemic and warm ischemic time, they are so short, and the kidney survives better. So a kidney from a living donor always spends time, but the others from deceased, maybe it was harvested from near Tanzania there or near Moyale there. By the time it's transplanted here, it is still losing some cells. Also, the transplant may be scheduled in advance once the donor is approved versus an unscheduled emergency. Like, for example, if we have a deceased donor program, you are on the list. Anytime you can be called to come to the hospital. You can never know when the kidney will be found. It's like an emergency. But a living donation, you plan. I may want also to share some data of our kidney transplantation at KNH that we began, and transplant began in 1984, but we began an active program in 2010 that we have always dubbed it Interlife program, where we partnered with a hospital in Spain through the sponsorship of a pharmaceutical company called Novartis, and we formed what we call an Interlife program. So this data is just within the Interlife program because before that, the data is not forthcoming. These are an average of 20 transplants. We began in 26, 25, like that. There were years that we had some external problems and we only managed to do 8 and 8, but we also have more up to now. These are the donation percentages that of the gender that donates more. The blue is the male and the red is the female. That donors, that the males, but this one has changed. At the beginning, females were more, but nowadays males are more. They donate more. While the recipient, most of the recipients are female at 72%, and also it corresponds with the data outside there that kidney disease is more in women. This one is the age bracket of the patients that we have operated, and like when we got the middle age group is where we have a lot of people. The old group, like even for the recipient, this one blue is the recipient, we have very few patients who are above 60 years, just at 4%, followed by between 50 56. But these middle ages happen. That is where we have a lot of, and for this 20 to 29, mostly these patients are normally due to glomerular sclerosis, and they're normally common with young people. But around here, also 40 to 49, this is diabetes, hypertension has been running for some time. The median, these were their ages. The ages was around, the most was around 56 for recipient. The median was around 56 for recipient, with a maximum of 66 for recipient. And donors, maximum was 59. In fact, our cutoff point for you to donate is 59 years. And the lower age is 18, because that is when you can be able to give consent that you want to donate. These are the relationship. We wanted to see who donates more, but siblings look like they donate more, and you'd rather treat your siblings well. You never know about tomorrow. From this graph, most of our donors were siblings. The matches, how did they match? The cross match we were talking about, most of them match at 50%. That is the most number. Below here is a worse match. It will still work, but you need a heavier immunosuppression that normally costs around 200,000 Kenya shillings. So we prefer half and above. What are the challenges? These are the challenges that were even displayed on the Kidney International, that journal, that we have donor risks. The donation risks, sorry, there is perioperative mortality rate at 3 and 6 for every 10,000 donor nephrectomy. So it's not without risk. And then 0 to 2% experience post-operative complications such as wound infection, thrombophlebitis, like any other Like, we've been lying there for 3 days. You may pick a clot, urinary tract infection because of catheterization, pulmonary embolism related to surgery, and secondary hemorrhage. In fact, there was a time in the media, sometimes there's a donor we lost, a Kenyan donor who died in India, and it was because of hemorrhage. I think a pin came off or something, and they really died. So it is not without risk. Most studies have not found an adverse impact on the incidence of hypertension, proteinuria, or survival, but several examples of end-stage renal disease in living donors have been documented. There is a possibility exists that such complications are underreported. Sometimes they are not reported well, because maybe people feel like they are shying away, they didn't evaluate properly. So those complications are not well documented, even though most advocates for living and related donations for the countries that normally practice living and related, they state that the donor should be given adequate medical care after surgery. There is little information about the quality of medical care provided to the paid donor during and in the immediate postoperative period and on later follow-up. This means that supposing this country it's allowed, you can collect somebody from the street to pay them and they give you a kidney. Your contract with them ends there. Maybe they are not in a position later on to afford any medical checkup. They'll never come. So that's why we are saying it is underreported. Number two, these are the challenges of unrelated donation. In addition to the medical problems, it has been apprehended that living unrelated kidney donation would hinder the growth of cadaver program. Cadaver program is the same as the deceased donor transplant, such that if you can be able to let me say that to set up a deceased organ donation is time consuming. It is expensive for the particular country, because sometimes you even need to airlift some organs from some far place with choppers and all that. So why would you involve yourself into all that, and you can be buying kidneys across the street? So that is how we say that if we encourage living unrelated, then the cadaver programs will never develop. Then living a related donation also, transplants involve much effort other than putting together the infrastructure and network for cadaver program, and it is tempting to adopt this shortcut. This consideration disadvantages those end-stage renal patients who have no motivated living donor and at the same time cannot afford a commercial transplant. I always find patients, some young, mostly boys, coming to the clinic and inquiring whether they can be able to sell their kidneys. Now I started collecting the information. So how much is a kidney sold? Because I have never known you can sell them in this country. They say something like 4 million. So how many people can afford 4 million for a kidney transplant? So more importantly, it would have a negative effect on starting transplant programs for other vital organs such as heart, pancreas, or liver, as these organs can be obtained only from cadaver donors. This means what? That we practice living donation of the kidney, because you have 2 kidneys, you can donate one and you can be left with one. How about heart? We must remove your heart. Once we remove your heart to give to another person, you are dead. Such that the other organ donation will never grow. That is why it's good to always try and develop the cadaver program. The researchers have also suggested that the continued use of living and related donors transplant to elevate the donor shortage in countries where brain death has not been socially or legally accepted. Living and related donation transplant increased from this one is a study that I collected from Iraq. From one in 1987, they only transplanted one person who was not related, but in 1991-92 it was 70, and the total number of transplant remained unchanged. What does this mean? That even if my sister would have wanted to donate to me, but I can buy a kidney, why not buy a kidney? You get what I'm saying? It pushed people from living donation, from related donation to buying the kidneys. And at the same time, the number of living related donation transplant decreased from 91 to 26 in the corresponding periods, suggesting that the living and related transplant had grown at the expense of living related transplants. In other words, once living and related donations were permitted, all those who could afford to pay opted for kidneys from this source rather than subjecting their relatives to the risk of donor nephrectomy. There is also another disadvantage, which is commercial exploitation of the donor, and this issue has been discussed both in the lay press and among other transplant communities. And most of the reports that have been in reference to living and related transplant in India, and more recently, similar reports have come to light from other parts of the world. In one report from Iran and Brunei, and they interviewed 32 donors, and only one of them wanted to donate the kidney without accepting any fee. The rest that one wanted said I needed to be paid. And the later report also cites some bizarre incidences, e.g., one person who had just been discharged from the hospital after donating his kidney for a fee brought his wife to the hospital for the same purpose to earn more money. You know, while they were in the hospital, they realized, so this neighbor can also pay another money like this. So they went for this and then brought the wife. And another person also wanted to donate both his kidneys to be able to buy drugs. And he was willing to go on dialysis, which is free in Iran. You get the way things can change once you allow the commercial donation. And in another instance, a person who was found medically unfit as a donor, let's say you have collected somebody for a workup. Once they come to the hospital, they are disqualified by the medical team because of one medical reason or another. They were so annoyed that they killed that recipient's son in rage and frustration. So that's how bad commercial exploitation of the donation is. Then we have other ethical issues. Ethical issues surrounding living donor organ donation, like an appropriate donor must be found, and donors must be highly motivated and pass physical, laboratory, and psychological evaluations. We also have another challenge of aging population. Like, for example, if I'm 60, for example, and I'm looking for a donor, we normally say that we like old for old, young for young. Like, for example, if I'm 60, I should be having a donor around 60 per year, even if they are my siblings or they are my husband or something like that. Chances are, by the time you are 60 and above, they will still not be donors because the upper limit, especially for our center, in donation is 59. And the aging population has increased the number of older patients being listed for transplant, and that means no living donors for them. And for older patients, if a donor is a spouse or a close friend, he or she is also likely to be older, making the organ less viable than the one from a younger person. We also have issues of, we have kidney diseases in the family. When we are looking at the steps of evaluating, we realize that kidney function evaluation is a step in itself. And the same way we say that diseases run in family, even an adult child may not be an ideal donor if there's a family propensity to kidney disease, such as diabetic nephropathy. No test is available to determine the risk for future diabetes, but it is known to run in families. And that is the end of my presentation.
Now, there is one of us who had asked if there is a kidney transplantation in Kenya now. I believe, Angela, you are aware now, we have a lot of transplantations in Kenya, not just in the private hospitals, but also in the public hospitals like Kenyatta National Hospital and MTRH. And so Bernard Muega had asked something about, do we have an upper age limit for kidney recipient?
Yes, Muega. The lower limit is the age into which you can sign your own consent, that is 18 years, and the upper limit for our center is 59 years, because they say kidneys age with you. If you're old, your kidney is aging from 60 and above. So our upper limit is 69. And somebody is asking, what is cadaver transplant? Cadaver term has stopped being used for some time because they say it's an insensitive term. Cadaver looks like an animal that died several days ago on the street. But nowadays they use the term deceased organ donation. In deceased organ donation, I had explained at the beginning, is where you can be able, if you have a patient who has, let's say they're in brain death, the patients who are in brain death where they cannot be able to come out of the coma, they'll just remain brain death and maybe die of infection and all that. The laws in the country should be able to allow organs from such people to be harvested. And that is why we had said you can remove the heart and use it to another patient, the liver, the kidneys and all that. And one body can be able to save 8 lives. So I'm hoping I've gotten that one clear. So that is what, when you are Googling, you'll get deceased organ donation. Is it possible to start sensitizing our community on cadaver transplant? And I have experienced my patients whom want to buy cadaver transplant. Yes, once the law starts, it will not be allowed to start without educating the masses first. There is normally a slide that I normally share of the way a certain religion, Muslim religion, the imams had informed the patients in Singapore, their followers, that they should not sign into kidney donation because they were saying the religion says that and all that. But after education, if you engage the community and educate them, because the law was passed meaning that kidneys from deceased organ will be used except if you are a Muslim. And when they were excluded from benefiting from those organs for 5 years, they agreed to it. So yes, we'll have that sensitization start, but we should start it when we are also about to start the program. It will be part of the process. Bernard is also asking, that's the donor age, but how about the recipient age? Is there an age limit? Bernard, it depends on whether it is a living related or a deceased. Even if it's a deceased organ from an ICU, even if you're 100, but you're medically fit, because that organ anyway is going to waste, it can be used. But for living, for you to living donation, if you are getting it from a living person, we normally cut it off at, in my center is 65 years. 65 years, so that at least we are sure you'll get up to 70 stably. So the youngest age we have ever gotten is a 10 to 12 years old, or 25 kilograms, whichever is higher. But for the older age, the oldest we have ever transplanted is 66. We also did a lot of studies and found that bad outcomes were also related to advanced age. But supposing we have a deceased organ donation, bora you are stable, even up to 100 years you can transplant.
So the message is the longevity of the potential longevity of the graft, and the patient survival is what they are looking at. And are there any other questions from the members?